Welcome to Christ in Me with Addie podcast. I'm your host, Addie Overla, and I am so glad that you're here. Whether you're new to Jesus or you've been walking with Jesus for a while or you're not sure about this whole faith in Jesus and life thing, I'm so glad that you're here. Because here on this podcast, we have real conversations about really big questions about faith and life from the lens and perspective of the Bible. And if you're not sure what you believe, you don't have to believe to be a part of what we're doing here on Christ in Me with Addie podcast. This is a safe space to join in these conversations, figure out where God might be leading you, and figure out what kind of relationship you have with Him. I can't wait to get into it with you guys, but be sure to follow me over on Instagram at Addie Overla and join the Christ in Me with Addie broadcast channel to stay up to date on all things with the podcast. Now let's get into today's topic. Well, hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Christ in Me with Addie, where we're actually live for the first time ever from Coffee on High in Canal, Winchester.
So fun.
I'm not gonna lie, I've always wanted to do that. I've always wanted to yeah, and then everyone cheers after. So this is very exciting for me. But I'm actually here with my good friend, Pastor Russell Moore.
How are you?
How are you?
I'm so excited. I feel like this is Christmas.
It kind of is, yeah.
But also Halloween. It feels amazing.
So today I asked my friend Russ onto the podcast to talk about something that he's been working on. And it's been kind of a process for 2 years?
Yeah, I've been in the process of writing a book for 2 years. We're in the week of its release.
Woo.
And it's surreal.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I'm excited. I feel the momentum building because I know we've had a lot of discussions outside of work because we work together, but also just as friends, that this is something that's so needed, especially for Gen Z coming up. And so why don't you tell us what the topic is?
Yeah, so the book's called Confidence. The subtitle is Destroy Insecurity, Discover Freedom. And it comes out of a few things. Number one, my entire life, I have felt the amazing, you talk about momentum.
Yeah.
Isn't there such a momentum when you feel confident?
Yeah.
There's a momentum emotionally, there's a momentum spiritually, there's a momentum in almost any arena of your life that you feel the avalanche of confidence.
Yeah.
And yet you feel the reverse effects of that avalanche with insecurity. And so I feel like my whole life, I said this in the book, but I feel like my whole life, confidence has been both a lifelong strength and a lifelong struggle. And I've felt the back and forth of it. And to be honest, one way to say it is I wrote the book I wish I had.
That's good.
So this book is for all ages. I mean, I've had people text me that have gone through the advanced copies that are in their 40s or 50s and said a couple chapters were like therapy and they wept their entire way through it.
Yeah.
But I did have in mind as well, they say if your book's for everybody, it's for nobody.
Right.
So I did have a specific person in mind. And while I feel like no matter what age, gender, wherever you're at in life, it will impact you in a really visceral way, I believe it is a message when I know some of my Gen Z friends, when I think of them, that I believe is a really timely message.
Yeah.
But I think wherever we're at, all of us, whether we're 8 years old or 80 years old, we know what it's like, the misery of being stuck in your head.
Yeah.
But then we know the power and the joy and the fuel when you're in your zone.
Yep.
When you're comfortable in your own skin and you're secure and you're full of strength and joy, nothing can change it. And I think the longer I go, the more I realize this is actually a more spiritual topic than we realize.
Yeah, it's good.
The book's written to be accessible to anybody, wherever their faith journey. But this book really is integral to our holistic health, wherever we're at.
Yeah, I think that's so good. Why do you think that it's so prevalent for Gen Z specifically? Because I just felt like, even for my personal self, I'm not Gen Z. I wish I could claim Gen Z, but I'm actually millennial.
Are you really?
I am, yeah.
Man.
I am.
And I'm right on the edge of millennial.
I am millennial. I hate to admit it, but I am. I was watching this reel the other day, and somebody was like, what would you consider someone who's old in today's world? Who's old? And they're like, I don't know, millennials, anyone born in the 90s? And I was like,
That's a dagger to the
that
heart.
hurt my pride a little bit. But this book came at such an important time for me spiritually, because I feel like, I just stepped into a new job a couple months ago, newly married, everything in life is changing. And I was like, wow, I actually think confidence is something that I need to to focus on building in myself. So why do you think this is such an important topic for like Gen Z specifically?
Yeah, well, I think there's probably a few reasons for that. I think number one, again, confidence is a holistic thing. So it's affected by our spiritual health, our emotional health, our psychological health, our relational health, our physical health, our practical health.
Yeah.
And I think there's some practical things that amplify insecurity maybe in Gen Z. Number one, whatever you are experiencing in your life, some people say like riches destroy you, fame destroys you. No, usually those things just magnify whatever's in you.
Yeah.
And so if you're insecure and then you're placed as a digital native where comparison is the currency through digital media, it's going to 10x whatever insecurity you're feeling.
Yeah.
If you are already feeling the jealousy pinch or the envy pinch, or you feel lost, and then statistics show that a lot of Gen Z, coming up Gen X, feels more lost than ever in terms of purpose, feels more disconnected than ever relationally, even though they're more interconnected than ever digitally. All of that's just going to amplify what they're feeling.
That's so true, because I'm involved in like social media ministry. I love social media. I love putting light and life and Christ out on people's feeds. And
you're amazing at it.
Thank you. I really had to check my motivation in the beginning when I was getting started, because putting yourself out there, like inevitably people are going to comment on your face, your hair, just anything they can make fun of, even just to be mean for no reason.
Yep.
And I was finding myself like, wow, do I really want to do this anymore? When you think about Gen Z, all they've ever known is a world with social media. Like, I grew up in a time where Instagram didn't start till 2011, right? So I was in high school still, at least that's when I got my account. And so I really had to check my motivation, figure out where my confidence comes from, because it can't come from the comment section. It couldn't. And so I'm at the point now where I actually don't even look at comments, because I just can't. They're not the reason why I'm posting, why I'm sharing. And if I do look at them, I won't have any confidence. So I want to ask you a personal question.
Yeah, okay.
Would you consider yourself a confident person? And has your confidence grown while writing this book?
So to the question, am I a confident person? I would say it depends on the hour. No, I think, it's such an interesting question, because, again, there is an integral part of me that has always felt a deep amount of confidence. I think some of that, I was very fortunate to have a very healthy family system.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you don't realize it when you're growing up, but sometimes that can create a pillar of health.
Yep.
Which obviously doesn't mean if you come from a broken background that you can't. In fact, some of the most confident people I know, as a reaction to the brokenness they were in, created incredible health in their life, and are some of the most successful people I know. But I think I think it'd be unfair to say that I didn't have a few cards stacked my way. But then honestly, I think crashing into faith, and then by personality default, developing skills in some way, those things have built confidence. But I've also really had extreme seasons of insecurity.
Yeah.
I've really battled. I'm a very over-analytical person. So my entire life, I feel like I've vacillated between, I'm extremely confident. You ever felt like, man, I'm confident in one area but not the other?
Yeah.
Or sometimes I'm really confident, sometimes I'm really insecure. And so I've always vacillated at times between, okay, I feel confident, whether it's my faith, this skill set, some of my relationships, between that and, I can't get out of my head.
Yeah.
I've had entire seasons. I feel like I've had half years where I felt like a prisoner inside my own mind. Or you talk about comment section where I am a prisoner to temporary success, and therefore I'm tied to the up and down chain of defeat, and letting that be what dictates my value.
Yeah.
And so it's been a back and forth thing. I think, to get all spiritual, when Solomon says to guard your heart above all else, there's a lot we can take from that. But here's one thing I think we can take from that. The human spirit's not static.
Yeah.
So we go back and forth. And so I actually think it's healthy awareness when we can feel ourselves, whatever's going on inside right now is not great.
Yeah.
Or, okay, I feel like I'm moving towards health. So I would say I'm decently confident. And, it's interesting writing this book, because I would say there are parts of it that when you really write a book, there is this really surreal journey where you have aha moments. Like you think you know what you're going to write. Some of the ancient writers said it's almost like you catch spirits, but not in a scary way. But you're writing, and all of a sudden you have aha moments where you set out to say one thing, but you make discoveries along the way. I think that's one of the most exciting parts of it. And in particular, chapter 6, when I'm writing about David and the coin, writing that chapter filled me with a fire that I swear took me to cloud 9 for about 3 weeks.
That's cool.
I had friends call me from across the country like, your voice just sounds full. And I think because of the reality and the truth in that chapter that I always believed and felt just rose up so intensely. So there's parts of this book that I'm like, okay, that was affirmation, or that grew my confidence. But then there's this other side where it's kind of weird. I'll be editing my book, and as I'm just flipping through editing, I'm like, oof, that hurt. Or, oh, wow, I needed that. And it is kind of a weird experience to be challenged by your own words.
Yeah.
And to have it almost like as a mirror of, oh, okay, I need to adjust. I need to shift. I need to change my internal narrative and dialogue right now.
Well, I feel like it's probably a lot like, too, when you're giving a friend advice and you're like, go home and you're like, oh, I really need to take my own advice. But
isn't it amazing how we're so good at giving others advice?
yes. It's
We're experts when it's somebody else. And then we come to us and we're like, I don't know.
Yeah. This book has really, I'm admittedly only on chapter 5.
Okay.
But it's so good. I've skimmed the rest in preparation of today. But I've been challenged by a lot of things to where, you don't really realize where you might be insecure until you're taken out of what's comfortable. And so, again, starting like a new job, being a part of a new community and a new church, all those things has really shaken up like, am I actually confident? Or is this an area of my life where I need to do things like live podcast recordings to put myself out there and like test that theory? But I wanted to ask you, why do you think insecurity is something we talk about so much in the book?
Yeah.
Why is insecurity such a hindrance of the human spirit? Like, why is it, you have so much passion for people reaching their full potential in life.
Yes.
And so why is that such a hindrance to a person's potential?
Well, you spoke to several things there.
Yeah.
So I'll try to be concise. But number one, I think it's powerful to realize what makes you tick.
Yeah.
And one of the things that makes me tick and wake up with fire in my gut is the endless potential that I believe is latent inside of every human being. And it causes me to sometimes challenge, maybe even too much, hopefully in a healthy way.
I've never felt challenged by
my friends
you.
say it's usually in a healthy way. They're being quiet. But I just believe so much in people's potential and the challenge and the fire and the destiny that's inside of them.
Yeah.
And I do believe insecurity is one of the great thieves of that. But you said something. You said, even working somewhere new, doing something like this, you're like, oh, wow, maybe there's insecurity.
Yeah.
One of the things that I talk about in chapter 6 is this is going to sound kind of a contradiction to the message of the book. I don't believe it's the desire of God for you to never feel insecure.
Yeah.
Because if you never feel insecure,
You don't need
it
it.
means your dreams are too small, or you're a sociopath, or you don't need God.
Or you think you're God.
Yes. Anytime that you actually allow God to speak fresh calling into your life, there will actually become a healthy amount of insecurity. And that gap is actually where God meets us.
Yeah.
And it's where God fills in his grace. And it's where God transforms us and grows us. But to the question, why do I think insecurity is so detrimental to the human spirit? I think a few reasons. Number one, insecurity is a prisoner that holds you back from every single thing God called you to do.
Yeah.
This may sound like a weird analogy. Maybe this is a risky analogy, but
Keep it PG.
Keep it PG. One of the things that alcohol does is it destroys your inhibitions, but in a really unhealthy way.
Yeah.
So you say whatever you think, you do whatever you want, and the end result, if you've had too much alcohol, is usually destruction.
Yeah.
I think confidence works like that, but in a healthy way. Because, see, what confidence does is it actually becomes the permission slip for you to live fully. And it becomes the permission slip for you to lose with wisdom the inhibitions that would keep you from pursuing the fullness of God's call in your life.
Yeah.
And it removes the fear that would cause you to actually love people well. And it removes the shame that would cause you from actually walking with joy
Yeah.
in every area of your life. And I also think insecurity is not just poisonous because of insecurity itself, but because of what it's connected to. So I once heard someone give the analogy that we like to think of all the emotions inside as sectioned off.
Yeah.
You know, almost like a to-go box. You ever get a to-go box? I know people that don't ever want their food to touch.
Yeah, that's me.
That's you. But you know, you have a to-go box, and all of a sudden, the mashed potato like goes over the top, and it gets into
Throw
the
it all
broccoli.
away.
Yeah.
Throw
yeah.
away the whole thing.
Well, that's how our emotions are. We like to think that our fear is not connected to unforgiveness. We like to think that our shame is not connected to this. So insecurity is dangerous for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is because insecurity is the fruit of some kind of root. Insecurity is dangerous because it's usually connected to shame,
Yeah.
or it's usually connected to the poison of fear, or it's usually connected to the danger of self-loathing. And so not only is this insecurity, is it a thief, but it's actually an exposer
Yeah.
of other deadly toxins in our spirit.
That's good. This might be, you could go super spiritual with this question or more
Okay.
practical,
Let's
but
go.
do you think that confidence can exist apart from God?
Yes.
Break that down for us.
Okay. We love to say all kind of things that sound really spiritual in Christian circles.
Yep.
Like, you ever heard somebody say, there's no way, if you don't have God, you don't know love.
Yeah.
Can I just say that sounds really good and really spiritual. And it's also really shallow and really insulting to people without God.
Yeah.
I have family members and friends and loved ones that do not know Jesus yet. And it is the burning desire in my heart. They know Jesus.
Yeah.
But they love. To be honest, some of them love deeper and better than people I know that claim to know Jesus. So because God is the essence of love, and he has put his image in all of us to an incomplete or imperfect or broken way can love.
Yeah.
Now, I believe because God is love, we will never love to the optimal level
Yeah.
that we could
That's
unless
good.
we let the love of God permeate who we are. In the same way, confidence. I actually know a lot of people that don't know God who have confidence.
Yeah.
Again, confidence is holistic. I mean, functionally, confidence can be grown and developed simply when you learn a skill and then you accumulate wins.
Yeah.
Confidence can be grown when you've done the hard work. You know, there's this famous basketball coach that says confidence is when you've done the hard work to succeed.
Yeah.
And confidence is so holistic and so functional, you can grow it. With that said, without God, there's always a limit and there's a ceiling.
Yeah.
Because when you operate out of confidence, you're drawing from something. And so, Addie, you're awesome and you're amazing.
Thanks.
But you're only going to be able to draw from the well as deep as Addie, which means you will always be at the mercy of somebody who can draw from a well as deep as God.
Yeah.
Because a supernatural confidence is when I tap into something deeper than me, but I'm tapping into the God inside of me,
Yeah.
who has no limit,
Yeah.
and there is no restriction to his power. And it's just an unfair advantage. This is a bad example, but it's like going into a casino and the house is stacked for you.
Okay, so you've already talked about alcohol and gambling now.
I'm just trying to meet people where they may be at, you know?
I hope they're not at a bar or a casino.
Yes,
but
yes.
No, you spoke to something there in me because I've shared this before on the podcast, but I actually have terrible stage fright. And this is how I know God has a sense of humor because I love to sing, but I have horrible stage fright.
Yeah.
And
But she's doing so well, isn't she?
Thanks, guys. I actually went to... Thanks, friends in the audience.
It's delayed, but they meant it.
I actually went to a sports psychologist for a couple years to help me with performance anxiety. And the sports psychologist mostly helped professional athletes with like 3-point shots and, just high pressure moments. And so when I came in and he was like, well, what do you want to work towards? I was like, I want to sing. And he was like, okay, that's a first for me, but I guess it's the same premise, you know? Because I used to be that girl who would run on the stage. Mentally, I was telling myself, you got this. You're so ready. Like, you've prepared. You've practiced. And I would still be that girl who would choke and run off the stage like, So really, it's once I met God and found Jesus, and I would pray to him and ask him for his power because I knew I didn't have it in me, but he could bring that into me, basically. And so that's what changed everything in my life. And now every time that I go out to lead worship or do something like this in a live setting, I mean, my husband and I, Solomon, give it up for Solomon, everybody, who's running production.
He's the man.
Overla Audio Productions. But we prayed a lot today just in preparation of this because we're like, God, we want what you want to happen here. And so tapping into that takes the pressure off of me and builds the confidence that what he has willed will happen.
I love that. So here's the thing. Your story, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but your story, and if you're listening to this for the first time, go back and binge all of her other episodes because you have the story of what God's brought you from and out of and now into is pretty epic.
Yeah, I love sharing my God story because I'm like, my God did that. Yeah.
And so, I think the important thing to remember for a lot of people listening that maybe not everybody has your story, not everybody has my story, is some people, the spiritual switch is immediate with certain areas of their life.
Yeah.
And then other times, it's kind of like, there's that epic story when Jesus raises Lazarus from the grave.
Yeah.
And he comes out, and it's amazing, and he's still bound. And it was a process that took time and other people to help unwind him.
Yeah.
And what I have found is a lot of us, even when we come to faith, there may be one area that switches immediately, and then there's another area that needs a more holistic approach.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm very excited about this book and the impact I believe it will have in people's lives is it's broken up into 3 main sections. One second, and I warn people in the forward or in the preface. Some people reading this book are going to find one part way too spiritual.
Yeah.
And then some people are going to find one part way too psychological, where it's dealing with inner wounds and identity and shame and all those kind of things. And then they're going to find one part way too practical.
Yep.
And so what I have found is almost all of us can grow our internal health in one of those 3 areas. And here's the real hat trick of it all. All of it's spiritual. We have a weird thing in modern Western Christianity where we over-spiritualize certain things and under-spiritualize other things.
I so agree.
And so, like, hard work, that's spiritual. And that actually helps build your confidence. But that doesn't sound as spiritual as I quoted Ephesians until I believed it.
Yeah.
But it's just as spiritual. And so part of what I want to do in this is destroy cliches and destroy facades and destroy superstitious Christianity so that life-changing spirituality can actually affect how we live.
Yeah.
And I think the most exciting thing I've heard from people so far is I've had people text me that said, hey, I've been crippled by insecurity my entire life, and I'm putting some of this into practice, and it's actually changing me.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a testament to me, but I think it's a testament to if we can get honest, because part of true confidence comes from, can we let down our facades and our masks and just be honest? Because true confidence comes from humility.
Right.
And we can humble ourselves to be honest and authentic and transparent and look at the nitty-gritty of our life from a holistic perspective. I actually think the shift can be radical.
Here's a question.
Yes.
So I feel like that's what I really want to relay about this book from what I've read so far is it's not this like fluff sort of book on confidence, like write affirmations on your mirror and recite them to yourself every morning. Like it's deeper than that. And so how would you define confidence? Like what is the definition of confidence you wrote this book from? And then what is the true essence of confidence you were trying to get to that's more than fluff? Like, what are you trying to tap into in the human soul when you're writing on this subject?
That's a great question. I mean, it's layered. And
it's very layered. I'm basically asking you to sum up the whole thing.
Yeah,
in like
I was going to say, the complexity of your question is why I wrote the book.
Yeah, yeah.
But I will say, the first thing that pops in my mind when you say, okay, if you have to define confidence is humble strength.
Right. Yeah.
I think confidence, I'm getting ready to speak this Sunday, and I'm really talking about Peter. But while I'm talking about Peter, part of it is the story of Jesus washing his disciples' feet. And I love that part where Jesus walks in, and it says in John 13, and Jesus knew that all authority and power had been given to him. Now, how would some of us walk into the room if we walked in the room and right before we walk in, and we know some people don't like us, we know Judas is about to betray us, and somebody said, superpowers, you own the world. Some of us, let's be honest, some of us want confidence because we want to prove ourselves, defend ourselves, or impress people.
Right.
Scripture says that Jesus realized he was the most powerful person in the room. All authority had been given to him. So he got on his knees, wrapped a towel around his waist, got a basin of water, and began to wash feet. See, insecurity is a fragile arrogance that's actually weakness, which makes me go into rooms to have to prove myself.
Yeah, that's so good.
But true confidence is a humble strength where I'm strong enough so I don't need to prove anything to anybody. I'm secure, so I go in rooms not to impress people, but to serve people.
That's so good.
So if I had to narrow it down.
You hit it. That's exactly what I was hoping you would talk about. I didn't know you'd go give a teaser to your sermon Sunday, but that's so good. So I kind of want to talk about insecurity for a second, shift just a little bit, and talk about a specific thing that you mentioned in the book, which was the zero-sum theory. And I think that has a lot to do with insecurity, jealousy, and I was wondering if you just break down what the zero-sum theory is. Why is that so hard to say? Zero-sum theory. And kind of explain what that is and what it has to do with confidence.
Yeah, so zero-sum is really popular in game theory. So basically it just means whatever, there's always a zero net value. So if you're playing basketball, right? In any point that you score is going to take away from my points.
I score all the points.
I can actually see you being really good at basketball.
I actually beat Solomon at Pig the other day. Not gonna lie. I did. I actually did. Anyway.
Just put him on blast. Put him on. So your gain is my loss, and my loss is your gain. That's the way it is in zero-sum sports, in zero-sum games, and whether we realize it or not, and here's where I want to get, if I could, real spiritual, psychological. Ever since glory left us in the garden, and our security blanket was ripped off, and we've felt naked and uncovered, our souls have been in a state of zero-sum, where we are scrambling for leaves to cover up. And you ever heard of lifeboat theory?
No.
So there's this thing called the lifeboat theory, and they used to do this horrible game in youth groups where you would pretend like there's all these people in a lifeboat.
This sounds traumatic.
Honestly, they stopped doing it because it kind of is traumatic. But if you're in a lifeboat, and everybody would have to point to somebody and say why they couldn't go over in the storm.
Oh my gosh.
And it's horrible. And somebody would be like, well, you're a cheerleader, or you're too smart, or you're too this. And it's this frantic feeling of, wait, am I valuable enough to not be thrown over?
Wow.
Am I valuable enough to not be discarded? Am I valuable enough to not be forgotten and left behind? Because if you're not thrown off, then maybe that means I'm thrown off.
I'm getting flashbacks to when I was the last kid chosen in dodgeball.
Yeah. You're like David. It was dodgeball, not king. And I don't think we realize how miserable it is when we choose to keep living in zero-sum in our soul. Because what it does is it makes me suspicious of you. When it makes me unable to celebrate you. So if you win, I'm threatened.
Right.
And if you're doing well or you're strong in an area I'm weak, instead of being able to just be free to celebrate you, I feel a pinch of envy. I can become tormented. We see from the story of Saul and David, Saul literally became mad, driven into madness because of David, and it destroyed his destiny.
Yeah.
But the antidote to zero-sum is positive-sum.
Right.
So really, zero-sum, if you want to boil it down into other categories, ways of talking, arenas of life, zero-sum is scarcity mindset.
Right.
It's fear and pessimism mindset. Positive-sum, another game theory, is the idea that there's so much abundance that even once you've gotten all that you need, I still have all that I need. And can you imagine, can we just all take a deep breath? What would our souls feel like if we walked each day in positive-sum theory?
Yeah.
With an abundance mindset, a faith mindset, that no matter how amazing you did, not only was I not threatened, but I'm like, oh my gosh, go Addie.
Yeah.
See, I think so much of the critique online is not really what we make the critique about. Theology is really a facade. And what I'm really upset about is not that I think Addie said something bad theologically. It's that fear and zero-sum mindset rots my soul. And theology is simply the safe language I can use to disguise the darkness in my own spirit so that I can destroy you down so that I feel better. Because after all, we're in zero-sum universe. But if I can let God destroy that and expand my heart and erase all the limitations, then I have enough room for my heart to get bigger, my mind to get bigger, and my relationships to get better.
Yeah. I also think the zero-sum theory, got it that time, zero-sum theory, is also the reason why so many of us struggle with comparison online.
Yes.
Because we see what other people have, and it convinces us that there is not that also for us. And something that I was reminded by when I read about that in the book is that if I believe God can do more than I ask, think, or imagine, why wouldn't there be more for me?
Yes.
Why wouldn't there be enough?
Such a small view.
For all of his children, you know what I mean? And something I've always kind of lived by, I have a background in fitness, and I quite literally came from fitness competitions where there's one winner, you know, is I always said I'm going into this just competing with myself. And I believe in collaboration over competition. And I think even that can have a spiritual take if we just apply being confident in ourselves and who God made us to be, and confident in the fact that he has some for everyone. It doesn't have that threatening insecurity that does hold us back. And honestly, that keeps you from having deep relationships. It causes paranoia. It makes you think that not everybody's on your team. And I like to live a different way where I just assume the best of everyone. And I think that's the way God calls us to be too.
Yeah, because you can not only feel it in your own soul, but you ever just have something going on in your life and you could tell somebody near you that you would love to be closer to? You ever just been able to tell that it was hard for them to celebrate you?
Yeah.
And it creates a divide. And honestly, it creates a sadness. Destroying zero-sum not only makes us better as individuals, but can you imagine cultures? Can you imagine if every workplace, can you imagine if every friend group was completely stripped of zero-sum? And everybody just cheered each other on like crazy. Everybody just championed each other on like crazy.
That sounds like heaven, honestly.
Sounds like heaven. And by the way, I did put this in the book. There's a practical step we can take. If you feel zero-sum in your soul, see, the prison a lot of us remain in is I have to feel different in order to act different. So if I don't feel like celebrating them, I'm being fake. No, that just means I'm settling for the lowest denominator in my soul. But if you feel zero-sum, that pinch, and you know when you feel it. That person's praised by the boss. That person posted another glorious thing on social media. That person got noticed by this. That person, why do they look so good? Why do they have to have that? Are they in Greece again? But when you don't feel like it, choose to celebrate them. Send them a text. Post about them on social media. Celebration is the antidote to zero-sum.
Yes, that's so good. Celebration over competition. I like that better. So if someone is struggling, I'm like practicality queen. And that's what I loved about actually this previous message's topic at X Church, if you guys want to check us out. You talked about 3 really practical P words. They were all P words, that's all I remember, you and your alliteration, to help people gain confidence. Could you just share those 3 with us if you remember them? If not,
so
I can
we
shout
just,
them out.
you know, one of the things we said in week 1 of the series was that a lot of times when you think of confidence, you look at it as either something you have or you don't.
Right.
And if you don't, well, fake it till you make it, put on a mask. But true confidence is not a mask you put on. It's an inner material you develop. And so we talked about what if we looked at confidence as a shape? What forms the shape of confidence? And we did a triangle. And we extracted it from the life of David and the story of David and Goliath. And if confidence is in the middle of the triangle, we talked about the one side of the triangle that forms that shape. We talked about as being the peace with yourself. That David was so secure even as a teenager that when King Saul tried to put his armor on him, somehow he had just the gravitas, the security to say, no, I know who I am and who I'm not. He had peace. Peace comes from being comfortable in your own skin. Peace comes from integrity. Peace comes from just knowing who you are and who you're not. It's a security. There's nothing more powerful than a secure man or woman. The second was preparation for battle.
I want to pause on that one really quick if I can, because I think it was during the peace and preparation ones that you said 2 of the things that stuck with me the most. I just gave one away, sorry. But the first one was peace, and you talked about, is it 1 Samuel chapter 17, when David is asked to bring food to his brothers and they say, "You conceited, wicked," what they like accuse him of all these things. And you talked about how David just kind of like shrugged that moment off.
Yeah.
And something that you said was that if you know who you are, other people can't ruin your day.
Yes.
And something about that phrase just gave me so much freedom, because I think something about my personal self is I'm always worried about, am I representing Jesus the best that I can, to the point where it's probably a huge fault of mine, because I should just be living out my Jesus life and not worried about what other people are thinking so much. But when you said that, I was like, until I'm at peace with that, it's true. Other people can't ruin my day. I have to become at peace with myself in that area first. I just loved that.
The most powerful thing about confidence is that you begin, when it starts being built on the inside, you begin living from the inside out instead of the outside in.
Yeah, that's good.
When there's not a security inside, my self-esteem and mood is at the whims of circumstances and people's opinions and what people say to me.
Right.
Outside in is a fragile place to be. But when it comes from the inside out, then it doesn't mean I don't care. It doesn't mean I'm never affected. But yeah, David in that moment when his brothers came against him was like, I'll ask them. he didn't respond with losing his temper.
Yeah.
But he also didn't shut down.
He didn't go home crying.
And go home the rest of the day. Which, by the way, I didn't mention this Sunday, but another great thing to tuck away as you build confidence is this. His brothers knew who was going to be king. So even though David was humble, they called him conceited. Why? Because insecurity will always interpret confidence as arrogance.
That's good.
There are some times that I've met people in my life that they were probably arrogant. Then there's other times where I was in an insecure season and they rubbed me the wrong way, but it actually wasn't an indictment that they were arrogant. It actually was an indictment that I was insecure.
You have such good analysis of situations. As you're saying things, I'm like, yep, I felt that. Oh, you're right. Conviction.
But it's so true, isn't it?
It is. It's very true. So the second one is
preparation for battle.
Preparation.
Yeah, again, this is the part that, and I go really deep into this in part 3, but we under-spiritualize the practical.
Yeah.
We say, well, of course David killed Goliath. God was with him. Yes, and.
Yeah. You should share the sheep, lion, bear thing.
Yeah,
in this one.
Saul's like, you can't take him on. And what did David say? He goes, yes, I can. I've prayed today. No, that's what we think. That's what we say. David said, oh, I can take him on. I recited my affirmations.
Yeah.
No, that's not what David said. David said, I was faithful over sheep. And then I killed a lion. And then I killed a bear. So the same God, so it's not either or, it's both and.
Yeah.
God's with me. But see, David didn't just operate because of God's presence with confidence. He operated from practice. See, I can have God's presence, but if I operate from presumption instead of practice, I'll still fail and struggle with insecurity.
Yeah.
But David had built a resume. David had that unsexy word, discipline.
Yeah.
We don't talk about David's discipline. The man prayed 3 times a day. In Psalms, it says he worshiped 7 times a day. As a little boy, he was diligent over sheep.
Yeah.
Malcolm Gladwell has this brilliant book on David and Goliath about how much practice David probably put into the sling and stone.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, God was with them. But you know what I found? God tends to work with people who are already working. God began to work with Gideon while he was threshing wheat. He worked with Elisha while he was plowing oxen. And he began to work with David while he was tending as a shepherd. God works with those who are already working.
Yeah.
And I think, again, not to pick on younger generations, but I think the danger sometimes in the social media age is we see a highlight reel and we want to snap our fingers instead of committing to the process. David had confidence because he went through a process.
Yeah.
I am actually so grateful that I had to work so many crazy jobs before I got into ministry.
Same.
And ministry is not any more important than any other job, but whatever your passion is, consider yourself blessed if you have to endure a lot of years of hard work that builds your character so that you can know when you get there,
Yes.
I paid the price. I let God develop me. I chose to go through the process. And there's something that's built inside of you that gives you an inner grit
Yes.
for the future.
I was a waitress for almost a full decade because that's how I paid for school. And dealing with difficult people, like having to still smile and serve people while they were just treating me horrible, that built my character, like literally for ministry in hindsight, because I'm like, I've done difficult things before, and now I get to love like Jesus, you know, and still serve people. So that's something that built my character. But I loved how you talked about it's so easy to look online and compare somebody's Goliath victory to your tending to sheep moments.
Yeah.
And how David was faithful with sheep, and that's how he was confident that he would succeed against Goliath. And I just think that too often we want to get to point B, but we're at point A, and then we convince ourselves we'll never get to point B because someone else is there. And that's back to the zero sum, but
it's kind of this weird tension, to be honest, because I'm that you can kind of person.
Yeah.
I want to tell anybody, go take it on, go do it.
Yeah.
There's also another part of me that's like, if you've never tended sheep, don't go fight Goliath. Because you might lose your head.
Right.
Like, we don't want to talk about that.
Right.
But there is a part to play of where you shouldn't be afraid to go to something just because you don't feel ready. But you should be willing and committed to go through the process of development.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I think kind of brings us to our last P. And the reason I'm saying that is because I realized before I knew God and I was trying to take on things, you know, and address my stage fright, people would always say, you just got to do it more. If you just do it more, it'll get better. And it never did. Like, sure, I got the gist of how, like, going on a stage and preparing and practicing and all those things worked. But until I started actually surrendering these moments to God, I never failed. And so what's the last P?
The last P is the presence of God.
Yeah.
And that's the foundation of the triangle.
Yes.
And if you know anything about David, he was a man who was passionate about the presence of God. He was obsessed. As my soul follows hard after you, as the deer pants for the water, so my soul longs for you. This one thing I've asked, that I can gaze upon your beauty in the temple. I didn't understand everything until I entered the sanctuary of the Lord. David was a man after God's own heart. He was a man obsessed with the presence of God. And he said, the Lord who delivered me from lion and bear will be with me.
Yeah.
And Saul's words were, may the Lord be with you. And there is no confidence like knowing God is with you.
Yeah.
There is no confidence like knowing God. And if I can be really spiritual, there's no confidence like the tangible experience of the anointing on your soul. Like, I'll be old school. I think there is no boldness like the boldness of when the anointing of the Holy Spirit's on your life. It turns Peter, who's denying he even knows Jesus, to a schoolgirl, into the first preacher of the first message of the new church, where he boldly looks at a group of people anointed by the Spirit of God and says, you crucified him, but God raised him from the dead. Now repent. I mean, there is a boldness that comes on you when the anointing of the Holy Spirit comes on you.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, God has helped grow my confidence over the years, but in moments where it matters, the reason I feel bold is not because of Russ. But if I can sense the Spirit of God on me, there is an unusual boldness and assurance that comes over me
That's good.
that can't be quantified.
I think I have one more question for you.
And then we open it up.
One more hot question.
Uh-oh.
That's a burning question.
Okay.
So if you guys have questions out there in the audience, go ahead and prepare them. You can come out on up to the front, and Solomon will actually hand you the mic to ask your question. And as you guys make your way to the front, I'm going to ask Russ one more question. But you said this in the book, and it really stuck out to me. But you said, whatever you believe about who you are will determine who you become.
Yeah.
Just break that down for us.
Yeah. You know, it was Solomon, not Eckhart Tolle, that said, as a man thinks, so he is. And not to pick on Eckhart, but whatever you believe about who you are becomes your self-fulfilling prophecy. All of us right now, the quality of our life is only rising to the quality of our thought life. The quality of our actual life is never going to be higher than the quality of our thought life.
Yeah.
And we live out the story of our identity. So not only am I, like, if I view myself through the lens of shame, horrible Russ, I'm this, I'm that, I'm not just going to live that out. I'm going to continue to become more and more of that.
Yeah.
None of us are static. As C.S. Lewis said, every mortal you meet is always becoming someone that is going to live in eternal glory or becoming an unspeakable horror. We are all becoming more and more of who we already are.
Yeah.
None of us are static. Andy Stanley talks about this and talking about the power of the path. So, I heard somebody say this the other day. Every negative emotion we're trapped in is connected to a story.
Yeah.
And so, whoever I think I am, however I view myself, however I define myself, is setting the script for the decisions I'm making, the path I'm going, which is ultimately going to determine the person I'm becoming.
That's so good. I think also like our mindset sets our ceiling.
Yes.
Right. And so I think for the longest time when insecurity really had a hold on me, I found myself shying away from things I actually really wanted to do.
Yeah.
Because I had actually convinced myself that I would fail before I even tried, you know? And I think so many people, I love that that's why the tag of the book is Destroy Insecurity, Discover Freedom, because that's what true God-given confidence does for you.
Yes.
It breaks the ceiling of your own capacity, your own capability, and allows God's ceiling, which is limitless, to invade your life. So
I love it.
So good.
I love it.
Well, hey, should we open it up for questions?
Let's do it.
Awesome.
Let's do it.
Who do we have first?
Oh my gosh, I have a line.
Look at this line. Wow.
I love it.
Hello. Thank you so
Hi.
much for putting this together. Great insights, because now I'm excited to read this book. So my question is, how do you approach setbacks or moments of self-doubt? And what strategies do you recommend for overcoming these obstacles?
That's a great question. The thing about failure is you will either look at it as pervasive or as potential. And what you choose to view your setback through will determine not only how quickly you can get back up, but what you end up believing about yourself. Like, let's say that you screw up in a way that's, let's say it's even something like moral. You're probably talking about like maybe a setback in career, but even if it's moral, you know, guilt is about what you've done, shame is about who you are. And so you could go through something, and kind of going back to story. Here's a great example. I had a pastor one time that he could tell I was kind of beating myself up. This is when I lived in Atlanta. And I just felt like I hadn't had a great year, and like just professionally. I feel like I had not been at the top of my game. I feel like I'd just blown it in a bunch of ways. And he said, son, you know, very Southern, like fatherly. He said, you can choose as you close out this year to take losses or to take lessons into the next year.
That's good.
And he said, the choice of how you view it's up to you. And so I think every moment we can look at as this is my demise or this is my educational catapult to the next place. And so I think, it sounds cliche, but it really goes back to perspective of, am I going to look at this? You know, Winston Churchill said, courage is how quickly you can go from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm.
Ooh, that's good.
And so being successful in life doesn't mean you fail. In fact, if you're not failing enough, you're probably not living big enough. And I think a big perspective shift, I told somebody that I'm leading at the church, I told him, I said, my goal for you this year is I want you to fail more. This right here, we don't know how this is going to go. But I'm like, what a beautiful opportunity to fail. And if it fails, we fail gloriously trying.
Yeah, and in front of friends.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Thank God. And so I think, does that help? What was the second part of your question?
That answered everything.
Okay.
All
okay.
right. That's awesome. All right, who's got the next question?
Hey. My question is, what role, you kind of just touched on this, what role does vulnerability and failure play in building confidence?
Yeah, I think kind of piggybacking off the last one, I think if you can make failure your friend, I think there's a beautiful place of security you can get to where you're like, yeah, I'm human, so I expect to fail. I think sometimes, Hunter talked about this most recently. I think if the opposite of true confidence is arrogance, arrogance can mean when you take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
And I think if there's anything Scripture shows, a healthy place in life is to take God seriously and take life seriously, but don't take yourself seriously. And so I think if you can just kind of like take the posture of, yeah, I'm going to fail. It's part of being human. And it's going to be awesome because I'm going to be so much better the next time. And I'm going to have the confidence that I took a risk and I kept going and I kept going and I kept going and I kept going. Anybody that has just made it in business or life has failed 1,000 times along the way.
Yeah.
So I would say that about failure. What was the first word you said, though?
Vulnerability.
Vulnerability. I actually think vulnerability is huge key to confidence. I felt, I don't know if this is hypocritical, but I felt a little insecure to write a book about confidence. Because you almost feel like there's this like pressure of, I gotta be Mr. Confidence then.
For the rest of your life.
Yeah, I can't. But I actually think confidence doesn't come from trying to convince yourself or others that you got it all together. I think true confidence is not feeling the pressure to pretend in any room. I actually think true confidence is when you can authentically be yourself. And insecurity only comes when you're worried people are going to see through your facade. But when you can walk into any room or any stage or behind any mic and be like, yeah, I mean, I'm strong in some ways, I'm weak in some ways. This is who I am. And also, confidence is humble strength, kind of going back to Scripture. God opposes the proud, but gives strength to the humble.
Yeah.
So vulnerability is actually a magnet for humble confidence.
That's real. That's
Yeah.
good. Thanks, Dakota.
Yeah.
All right. I think we have time for one more question.
Let's do it.
Hey, I actually had two, but they're not really for me. They're more for people that have a hard time like analyzing all of the questions and trying to unpack everything that's in the book. So the first one was, in your opinion, what's the first step to fight insecurity?
Say that again.
I said, in your opinion, what's the first step to fight insecurity?
To fighting insecurity. I really, the first thing that comes to my mind is if somebody were to say, what's the first step to Egypt? It depends on where you're standing. So I really think, again, kind of going back to the way the book's split up into 3 different parts, I really think that answer is going to be different for everybody that reads it, depending on their starting place.
Right.
I did have somebody come up to me after the first week's part of the series that I know has a deep relationship with Jesus, and said, "Hey, what would if you give me a practical way to grow my confidence?" And I just told him, I said, first thing that pops in my mind, 2 things. One, spiritually, find a way to connect with God in a deeper level every day, because I do believe that genuine confidence flows out of deep connection.
Yeah.
And then I told him, I said, the second thing is a younger dude, I said, I'm not saying that you don't. I said, but pick one small discipline in your life, and in this season, grow it. Pick one small discipline and grow it. But that answer may not be the same for everybody. Again, some people, it's practical steps they need to take in this season. For some people, it's a spiritual renewal and revival that needs to happen in their soul. For some people, though, like the person that texted me last week, it's almost like counseling.
Yeah.
That for some of us, insecurity is connected to a deep wound that actually almost needs surgery. And so I would just say it really depends on where that person is at, depending on their next step.
That's good. There's actually, just throwing this out there, a confidence assessment that
There
you
is.
can take within the book, which is awesome to kind of help you gauge your starting point too. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool.
Do you
What
guys
was
have
your,
time for the second
Yeah,
one?
what's your second question?
Okay, so the second one, they talked, the last 2, people talked a lot about failure. Should you be confident in decisions you make that lead to failures?
Can I answer this one?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not the expert, but I want you to jump in after
Well,
this.
I'm not either.
I just want to give my experience on this one, but I failed a lot in life, and I shared this a whole bunch on my podcast. Just decisions that I made that weren't super smart, and things that I did acting out of emotion and not out of true confidence or God or anything like that. But if I could go back, I would do it all over again the same. And the reason is because that's what God used to make me into who I am. And I actually think it's through failing that I experience now like deeper empathy for people who are going through the same. And God, in a way, made that, like, if I can say this, my superpower to help me connect with others because I've been there. I experienced it. And so I always felt like things like that discredited me for ministry or to even like share God online. But I've just seen him use that time and time again. He knew I would make the decisions that I made and that would help me reach the people that I've been able to reach in the capacity that I've been able to reach them just from failing and making the decisions I made that inevitably led me exactly where he wanted me. So
I love that.
yeah.
I love that.
Do you want to add to that?
I mean, I think what you said is great. There's this neuroscientist that is studying rats.
Are you comparing me to a rat right now?
No, but this is true. There's a neuroscientist, Dr. Adam Kepix, that is studying rats and is arguing for confidence based on decision making. And that confidence really comes down to statistical decision making.
Yeah.
And there's these authors that have actually built like a whole empire of books on them. And so I think what I would say is confidence grows when you make wise decisions. But I also think you can, again, pivot your story to say, oh, I messed up there.
Yep.
So now I'm armed with even more knowledge going into the future. And I have that confidence. I also think, too, that you should take any decision that you made from courage or integrity should grow your confidence regardless of the result.
Yeah.
Because I heard somebody say the other day that he looked his team in the eye. He said, for the next season, I am not critiquing any of your job performance based on results, but I'm critiquing it based on courage. Because we grow far more from risks that we take based on courage than we do. You know the people that don't make mistakes? They're the people that never risk.
Yeah.
And so I actually think you should never be discouraged by taking a risk and it failing.
Yeah.
I only feel discouraged by the risk that I don't take because I have too much fear.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Any other questions? Oh, we got
Hunter
one more.
McGonigal.
Get on up here.
So, quick note on Hunter.
We got Hunter on the mic.
I mentioned this Sunday. Hunter, brave man, son-in-law to the pastor at the church. He planted the seed for the book.
Wow.
And
So what's his percent in royalties?
this is percent royalties. The moment it crosses over into millions.
And it will.
There's a house with your
It
name
will.
on it.
In heaven.
The
In
moment it
heaven.
crosses over into millions, I am buying you a really good lunch.
Oh, amen.
And it's
Come
gonna-
on. But the question I had is, what is one part of the book that you maybe wrote but didn't end up on the copy, the final copy? Was there maybe something you wish you added in there, or maybe it's something you saving for later?
For the sequel.
That's a great question. I love that question. Well, first off, I changed the entire format of the book about 7 months in.
Oh, wow.
Originally, it was going to be 4 parts, and one of the parts was going to be super spiritual, like spiritual warfare, anointing, Holy Spirit, authority of a believer, all those kind of things. And then I was like, I'm not going to have the room for this, and I don't know if this fits in this book. So I've secretly, I don't know if it'll come out one day, I've secretly, when I was in between edits, and I got about 3 or 4 chapters done, started writing a book that would be a follow-up more for leaders, from a deeper spiritual dive. If this one's called Confidence, this one's called Boldness. And it dives deeper. So I thought about releasing a campaign. So there's that. And then honestly, just kind of like last time, doing a series at church, I feel this weight that I want to bring new material, which is a great challenge, and I've loved doing it. But then every time I feel like God gives me new material and I preach, I'm like, man, some of that was good. Like, I wish that was in the book. Like, because and then sometimes you are so much in something that you can't see the forest for the trees. Then you back up and you're like, okay, how do I make this really concise for a message for a Sunday? And then I'm like, I think I explained it better there than maybe I even did in that chapter. Or, I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's all I had.
Well, awesome.
Great.
Can we just give it up for Pastor Russ?
It's been so fun.
I told him the only reason I was confident to do this is because I knew you'd carry the conversation. So thank you.
Is that code for I talk too much?
No, it's code for you're the perfect person to interview. So thank you for being here. Thank you
It's been an
for
honor.
writing this book. It's helped me a lot. And from the show of friends and faces we have, I think it's making a big impact. So can you share with everybody who's listening,
Yeah.
not live, but we'll hear this come out on Friday, where they can get the book, the release date, where they can follow you, all the things.
Absolutely. So the book, Confidence, Destroy Insecurity, Discover Freedom, Russ Moore, you should be able to find on Amazon. Eventually, we'll have it like on all the online retailers.
I'll actually have it linked below
Okay,
in the show
yeah.
notes as well for everyone listening, so they
Absolutely.
can find
Maybe
it
we
there.
can put the confidence assessment is free.
Yep.
So you can go on and take the confidence assessment. There is a website, www.russmore.co, that has like just deeper resources like past messages, podcasts, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, as far as follow me, I'm on social media some.
You got an Instagram?
Yeah, at More Russ is the handle.
More_Russ, right? No more
just-
underscore?
No.
Was there ever an
more,
underscore?
No, two O's, More Russ.
Well, now I'm going to have
That's
to
it.
link that too because I said it wrong, but he is more Russ.
So, yeah, but this has been, I feel like, a really rich conversation.
Yeah.
And pick up a book and get it to somebody that you think needs it too. I was telling somebody, I was like, it may feel weird to give somebody like a book on confidence because like, oh, you're saying I need confidence. So I was telling somebody the other day, I was like, pick somebody that's awesome but doesn't know it.
yeah, yeah,
Pick a friend that you're like, you know what? I wish you could see yourself the way I see you.
yeah, that's good.
I wish you could see yourself the way God sees you.
Yeah.
And I want you to believe in yourself the way I do. And what's so cool is, by the way, because this is rooted in faith but also backed by psychology, 3 different clinical psychologists vetted the book.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to make sure it was helpful and solid, true and true. Theologians vetted it, but also clinical psychologists. But there are people that are buying these. I have a clinical psychologist friend in Atlanta that's getting this for her practice, several of those. And then people that are taking their work through it,
Yeah.
people that are taking their small group through it. And so obviously believe in it. I think it can be a great resource for whatever your circle looks like, your community looks like.
Yeah.
And thanks for being part of the journey.
I said on Sunday, this is a great book to get for someone that you know, maybe they just went through a divorce or someone who is starting a new job soon.
Yeah.
Like, everyone could just hear reminders on confidence, honestly, no matter where they're at. There's a situation for everyone where they need more confidence. So
Absolutely.
if you're hearing this conversation and you're like, yep, that's me, I need more confidence, grab a copy of Russ's book. But before we sign out, I just want to give a special thanks to Coffee on High.
Come on.
Coffee on High. Give them a follow on Instagram. They were so generous to host us
Yeah.
for this live recording, and I can cross this off my bucket list now.
You've
It's
done
kinda
it.
cool.
You've done it.
I have a
Now
little
you're
bit
gonna be
more
more confident.
confidence. Yeah, okay. Oh, gosh. What a way to end. But anyways, thank you all for being here, and I will see you next time on Christ and Me with Addie.